Hey, everybody. Welcome to another live episode of Mavens of Data. We've got a great topic for you today, talking about how to deliver effective data presentations. Amazing guest here who just crushes this topic. Before we introduce him, I would love to hear from folks in the audience. If you could just drop into the chat and let us know where you're dialed in from. One of the most fun things about this show has been getting to see some of your faces and names come up week after week. So would love to hear from you, and very, very happy to see some folks here again. With that, Christopher, would love for you to say hi to the audience and tell us a little about yourself.
Absolutely. I'm Chris, a data storytelling presentation trainer, and I started my career in the data industry, creating dashboards, reports, analyses. And one thing I noticed consistently was the biggest problem in the industry wasn't necessarily lack of technology. It was lack of good communication. We created all these great products, but they never ended up seeing the light of day because their value wasn't communicated well. I decided I wanted to make it my mission to close that communication gap I see too often in the industry between data teams and the business. And now that's what I do, helping companies upskill their teams in knowing how to present, tell a story, speak with confidence, and really make that communication a core part of their professional development.
Yeah, fantastic. Chris, thank you for doing that quick intro. Let's get into the main part of the conversation. These are just some of the questions that we'll cover. It's going to be more of like a free-flowing conversation, but you can definitely expect us to hit these and lots more. Chris, I'd love to maybe kind of start things off with, one of the things when you and I talked, it sounds so much like you have really found your calling and you're super, super passionate about this pivot that you've made to help folks with communication skills and leadership skills. What is it about that is what's so important about that you've really wanted to devote your entire career there?
It's a very personal reason. And I never, for most of my life, felt myself to be a confident communicator. Very introverted, very shy for school, a lot of my time at work. And I never felt like I had a proper voice in conversations, personal, professional. And I saw colleagues around me in the data industry feel the same way. They were technically brilliant, but when it came time to present, tell a story, speak with confidence, they didn't have the training necessary to do that well or do that confidently. And it took me a very long time to work on myself, work on these skills, to find the training necessary to make myself the confident communicator I wanted to become. And I said, why don't I help other people with the same thing? So now what I do as a coach and trainer is essentially, I see people in the same spot I used to be in, and I help them overcome the same challenges in a much faster timeline. Because I think I don't want anyone else to feel they're limited in their career potential because of communication skills.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it makes me think, first, you're probably talking to every person in the audience right now, right? Like most of us who lean towards the data side tend to be introverted, tend to be a little nervous about presentations. So I think that's something that definitely resonates with me, not a natural skill. And I love that you're focused there. And it makes me think, I want to just quickly get a poll up for folks to just kind of understand who's in the room. So if you guys in the audience, if you could submit that real quick, we'll understand kind of who's here. And yeah, it's looking like a lot of analyst level, little senior analysts, people who are trying to break in as aspiring analysts. So definitely really helpful to understand this. Chris and I can kind of steer the conversation there. So one question for you, Chris, if this, we all know it's so important, right? Like everybody says having good communication skills is so important. Why do you think it's so hard, and why do you think so much of the conversation also is about the technical skills, like if you participate in the online community?
I think a lot of it has to do with the personalities that often enter the data space. As you mentioned before, many of us tend to be more on the shy, introverted side, preferring to be behind the laptop coding away instead of standing in a room full of executives and a board of directors. And for that reason, we don't really want to work on communication skills. At least I didn't for a large part of my career. We much rather prefer being in the details and the weeds and focusing on that granular part. The other reason I think that communication isn't as often emphasized as it should be is it's often made to be something you should be born with. You should already be gifted at it, and it's not necessarily something you can learn. That's a total misconception, in my opinion. Because if you were to tell someone to learn SQL, that they need to work on their SQL skills, they might be slightly offended for a moment, but then they say, oh, I can work on that. I can watch a course, and I can learn that very easily with a free YouTube video. But if I tell someone to work on their communication skills, that becomes a little more personal. That is taken more as an offense, as perhaps an offense on their intelligence, because we often associate people who can communicate well with people who are intelligent. And also communication is something that people just have. But what I have learned and what I want to espouse here especially is that communication, like any skill that you know, SQL, Tableau, Power BI, Python, R, is learnable. And I am an example of someone who had to learn everything from the bottom, from zero and from scratch. And I'm sharing that story because I want it to be clear that if you have a correct path for learning communication, you have guidance, you have support, you have the discipline to work on it, you can also become a confident communicator.
Yeah, that's an awesome insight. And it's such an interesting contrast where, you know, somebody who doesn't know how to use SQL or doesn't know how to use Power BI, it's like, of course you don't know until you know, right? But then on the other side, oh, if you're not a great communicator, people don't think of it the same way. They don't think like, oh yeah, I just don't know it yet. They think I'm not a great communicator, end of story. And I'm totally with you. That's not the case. I mean, I think about, like, I've got a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son. They're going to be better, hopefully, by the time they're my age at communicating, right? So I think that's, it's great the way that you frame it. It's a skill to be learned just like others. That's awesome.
Yeah, and to add on to that, this is going to be a bit of a spiky opinion, but I believe that the educational system for me was insufficient. It taught me so many things that are not applicable to my daily life. For example, I used to know how to do calculus, differential equations, linear algebra. I used to know the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. I don't need to use that as a core life skill. What school didn't teach me is how to do my taxes and how to speak well publicly. Core life skills. If you don't do your taxes, you'll go to jail. If you don't speak publicly, know how to do it well, you're going to be limited in your career advancement. And what I hope to fill in terms of the work that I do is that gap I see so much in the educational system and professional development is, how do you know how to communicate well? Not just the English part, which school teaches, syntax, grammar, vocabulary, but how to do it well. Not just write an essay, but communicate verbally in a way that's clear and concise.
Yeah, that's awesome. And totally agree with it. It's like there's certain of these core things that you need all the time that you just don't get, at least, you know, through a traditional education, or most of us aren't lucky enough to get it. And I love that you're out there every day sharing this information, because I think you're one of the few people that I've seen that really focus on this stuff. And it is so important. We talk about at Maven, we talk about it as the analyst trifecta, where we're thinking about technical skills, communication skills, and then sort of business acumen and problem solving. And it seems like everybody wants to talk technical skills. Communication is probably the least talked about. But when I think about sort of the amazing data professionals that I've gotten to work with, they tend to all skew towards really good, effective communication and interpersonal skills, because that's how you make an impact on an organization. It's very hard to do it without that. So I love that you're focused there. One thing, Chris, that I have seen from your stuff, you talk a lot about the difference between sharing data and telling stories with data. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the distinction you make there?
Yeah. There's a big difference to me between a slide deck that has a bunch of data visualizations and a presentation that has a story. They're very different things. For example, I can put on one slide a data visualization about sales going down. On another slide, I can put a data visualization about what segments are affected. On another, so on and so forth, X, Y, Z. But that's not an interconnected story. That's just a list of events over time. just like point, point, point. But what a story is, it's more than that. It's more than the sum of its parts. I have point one, point two, point three, and they're all connected up to a greater idea that I want to communicate to my audience. What I like to say is storytelling is not just about the what, the facts and the facts and the facts, but the connective tissue of why that makes those facts matter. And on top of that, what do we do about those facts? That's what makes a story powerful, is not telling people just what's going on, but why it matters and what they need to do about it.
Yeah. Is that something that you'd recommend? Like anytime somebody is putting together an analysis or a presentation, like always have some kind of takeaways about what action should be taken and be really explicit about that?
Absolutely. In one training I gave for a company recently, that's the framework that I delivered to them, is the what, so what, now what is one example of that. Analysts, we usually just give the what, because that's the limitation of our work. We just focus on what's going on. But we need to think from the bigger strategic picture of the business. Why does that matter to the people that we're speaking to? And what do they need to do about it? When I communicated this framework to the executive in the room, they said, this is exactly what we need, because too often we get the what. Now I can ask people, so what? Why is that important? And then I can ask them, what do you recommend I do about it? That's what I recommend to everyone.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the ways I sometimes think about it, I talk about this as a scoreboard analyst versus a playing field analyst. And, in my distinction between those two is the scoreboard analyst kind of, makes a dashboard, kind of sort of like bean counting with some technology behind it. You're tracking something. The playing field analyst gets really good at saying, what should I do about it? And they say, like spend more marketing dollars here, or wow, these courses that you made have such good engagement versus these other ones kind of stink. Like focus on topics like this, and those really specific takeaways. I think that's the value that that somebody can produce. And I love working with analysts that kind of lean towards the playing field. So yeah, I think we're saying the same thing there, which is great. How about, let's hear from the audience real quick. I'd love to get from you guys just in the chat. What do you guys think is the hardest thing about delivering a presentation? Like what's the most painful or what's the most difficult part for you? And we'll see how open people are going to be here and with their answers. But yeah, so we've got Christina saying staying on track, like not going all over the place. I could definitely resonate with that. Yeah, Matthew saying pace. Nerves. Chris, what do you think were some of the hardest for you kind of before you invested so much time in getting really bringing this to be a superpower for you?
Nerves was a huge one for me. And to combat that, I used to write every single word in a presentation, word for word as a script, memorize it, and then say, okay, I have this safety net. I have it perfect here. I just have to deliver it to people. And that was one of the worst mistakes I've made, because if you do it like that, and I saw someone in one of my data storytelling classes do it like that, when you deliver it and you mess up just one word, you lose your entire place in that memorized flow. You have no idea what to say next.
Yeah.
What's a better approach is preparing an outline of points. Where am I going? Where am I starting? Where am I going from there? How do I get to the very end? And then just rehearsing, talking freely and naturally through those points. So there's a degree of improvisation, that muscle that we need to build, and also the muscle of building a good, tight story that we can just smoothly flow through. Another tip for nerves that I like to give is the audience is on your side. We think that everyone in the audience is going to judge and criticize us and catch us on all the mistakes we made and say, oh, that person said that one time, or they missed that one fact, or they forgot to say whatever it might have been. But we have to remember that the audience is in that room because they want you to do a good job. They don't want you to waste their time, and they trust you. Otherwise, why would you be presenting? So it's important to remember, typically in every presentation you give, the only person who's not on your side is yourself, because you're the one doubting yourself. And remember, everyone else is out there supporting you.
Yeah. Oh, I think those are really good tips. Trying to have a script and just stick on it, that resonates with me. Even when we started doing this show, for the first show, I thought, I got to deliver this big intro, and I wrote it all out and I practiced it, and the feedback from my friends who I asked people to beat it up, like, tell me where I'm terrible at this. They said, dude, you just look so tight. You didn't seem like you at the beginning. And then towards the end, totally off script, you're having this conversation trying to get value out of the guest. And it felt so much better. And so now no script. We're just, Chris, you and I talked a little before about kind of the topics we wanted to cover, but same thing, like there's no script. We're not sticking to a rehearsed thing that if you mess up, it's all over and there's pressure to stay on it. So I love that advice.
Absolutely. And this is how we differentiate ourselves from AI too. I think it was just a few weeks ago, ChatGPT 4.0 is released. It can talk now and it can write entire scripts and say them. So how does that make us any different from AI? It's the raw human mistakes that we make and the natural spontaneous flow that makes for interesting conversation.
Yeah, totally. There's I'm just reading some of these comments in the chat. There's some really, really good ones. One from Steve that I think I'd love to hear your take on. So he says one of the hardest things for him is not having executives sidetrack the topic before you get to the punchline. And I think that's really important because a lot of times as analysts, we're not necessarily like the most domineering person in the room. And so you have these executives that are that person and can kind of steamroll. Any advice on somebody encountering that situation?
What I would recommend is saying the point first, not waiting to get to it in a room of executives, because that will happen. That is their personality. That's how they got to the position they're in, because they have the audacity to interject and steamroll the conversation directed in the way that they want. It's our responsibility to get to the point as quickly as possible for them. So what I recommend is for any presentation at that level, make it really short and concise, maybe even just 5 minutes. Say to them, this presentation will be 5 minutes. After that, love to hear and open up for discussion. You get to your point in that first 5 minutes. In the very first sentence, you can say what you want from them in that conversation. I want you to sign off on this proposal. I want you to give money to this particular thing. This is what I want you to approve. And then go into the reasons for that and then the background details for that. So getting to the point first is how you overcome that frustration.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, I think that's really smart. Don't give them the opportunity. Hope you don't mind, Chris, if there's a few of these. I'm just looking in here. Such good stuff that I think impacts a lot of people. So Trisha, how are you? Trisha's been on, like, I think almost every show that we've done. She says she presents in a meeting daily, and the biggest issue is other people in the room sometimes not paying attention or being engaged or being rude and talking over. What do? You just have that jerk in the audience that is talking over when they should be listening. What do you do with that person?
One piece of advice I would give is at the very beginning to establish what the ground rules are. What I often encounter as a communication coach and trainer for companies around the world is not only the personality differences, but the cross-cultural differences. Not everybody's on the same page about what expectations are. Some people don't know you should show up on time to this meeting. That's not a value, and that's okay. That's part of their culture. Some people, they find it more acceptable within their cultural frame to interrupt in conversation. That's natural to them. It's a sign of engagement. What's important to do to make sure we're all on the same page at the very beginning of the meeting, say, what I want is to have these 15 minutes of me presenting. After that, happy to have any discussions present. If someone does not respect that, then you can mention to them, hey, that's a great question, or whatever it is that they were saying, but let's move it to the time at the end that we designated. So it's about being the leader in the room to establish what people should do. And then if people deviate, having them respect that boundary.
Yeah, that's awesome. Really great questions here. I mean, I could do this the whole time, but there's some other questions we talked about that I want to get to. Another piece that you've talked about before is like hooking the audience and getting them sucked in, like right off, making them care about it so that they do listen. It's kind of in line with the last question. Like, any tips for getting them hooked, like right off the bat?
This is a great segue from the last question, because one reason people may not be engaged, potentially, is the hook is not present at the very beginning, letting them know why they should be interested in. I see many presentations that start out, for example, with, hi, my name is Christopher Chen, and this is what I do, and I've been working at this company for X years. That is one of the most boring introductions to a presentation ever, because your name is important, but not to the people in the room. They don't know why they should care about you. The most important thing you can do at the beginning of a presentation is hook them in with why it matters to them. What's in it for them? Shocking statistic. Company is losing money these past few months. Wow, I should be listening to this presentation. Or this is what we're going to discuss in this presentation, this big initiative. Then people want to know, what is that? It's about creating an open loop at the beginning and then filling it with the presentation so people are always anticipating what's coming next. That's how you properly hook someone onto a presentation.
That's awesome. And that really resonates with me. And one of the things that brings up for me is, and it probably seems surprising that this is even related, but a couple of years ago at Maven, we were getting pretty active on TikTok and creating content on TikTok. And that was the number one tip that we found from looking at people that were really successful, was that if you start a video with, "Hi, I'm John from Maven Analytics," it's like swipe, no one cares about that. If you start with, "I'm going to teach you SQL in 60 seconds," they're like, I could do 60 seconds on that. That's useful. I don't care what this guy's name is, but I've got the 60 seconds, right? So I love that. Just like get right to that hook, get to the value as quickly as possible, and cut the nonsense. I might need to think about that a little bit in my intros for shows like this, but that's fantastic. Very cool. How about for somebody who's like just getting started and they're super nervous about presenting? They sort of think they're that person that can't do it, can't get to where you are. I know you already said like you were that person, and now you're pretty good and you teach other people. So like, hopefully that's some proof that anybody can do it, right? But like, other than that, what steps would you recommend somebody take?
I would look at how you learned technical skills and then see, how can I do the same with communication skills? Because it is the exact same process for me. For example, to learn SQL, you probably said, okay, I need to have a step one. I'm not just going to learn SQL in a day. I need to learn the basics. So tomorrow, I'm going to learn about these functions. The day after, I'm going to learn about these functions. The day after that, maybe I'll advance to some more of the grammar involved in the language. Communication skills are the same thing. You're not going to instantly become a confident communicator, but you can identify your step one. What can I do tomorrow? And what I always recommend to people who want to become confident is to record yourself. And it's one of the most uncomfortable things to do. I hated it. Everybody I tell that they should do it, they also hate it. But when you can see how the world sees you, it changes the perspective of how you should improve. You realize, oh, I did that. I didn't like that too much. Maybe I'll fix that the next time. Doing that every single day, imagine how much you can improve in just 1 month. Repeat that over a series of months. Imagine how much you can improve in a year. So communication skills, just like any technical skill, is putting in the reps, doing it a little every day, building it up.
Yeah, I would love to hear from folks in the audience, how many of you, just do like a Y or N, yes or no, have ever recorded yourself delivering a presentation with the intent of kind of critiquing yourself? I'm guessing mostly you're going to say no. I just think it's probably something that's not common, but it sounds like such a good idea. Let's see what folks have to say here. A couple yeses. Good for you guys. That's awesome. Chris, I'm not sure who I heard this from. It could have been you, but I heard something pretty similar. Record yourself. And what I loved, a little nuance of it, they said, just watch the recording with no audio and see like, what are your nonverbal cues? Like, are you not using your hands enough? Are you crazy with your hands? Are your eyes all over the place? That type of stuff. And then separately do it without the video and just do the audio. And I loved that insight. Was that you? Or it might have been somebody else, but I love that tip.
It might have been me or someone else. I do see that tip often, and I highly recommend it, because that's how you break down communication into those manageable chunks that you can do every day. You can say, tomorrow, I just want to work on the audio part. Maybe you're too scared to watch yourself, so you just record a little voice note on your phone, and you just do the voice part. Oh, my voice was too monotone. Maybe I can inflect it a little more on the important points, or maybe I didn't pause enough. I'll interject a pause every so often. Then you can advance to the video. You don't have to play the audio, but you can say, how is my body language? How are my facial expressions? Do I have that executive presence I want people to feel? Then you put it all together, all those little pieces.
Yeah, it's awesome. I keep going back to the chat from the things that people said were hard, because there's so much good stuff in here.
Yeah.
Richard, another person who we've seen on a lot of these, thank you, Richard, for being so active, says one of the hardest things is anticipating the questions that are going to be asked. And I think that's one of those things that I've told analysts that have been on my team. If you can anticipate what the follow-up question is and then have an answer ready, you look so smart. They're like, oh, don't worry about that. I got that in the back of the deck. I can answer that perfectly. You just look so strong. What advice would you give somebody to get good at that, specifically the anticipation piece, like understanding what questions will come up?
I highly recommend that first, because especially in executive presentations, which are not so much you just talking at them, but more of a conversation where they ask questions and you have to have answers, it's so impressive if you can say, oh, on the appendix slide number 164, I have an answer to your question. It shows you put in the time, dedication, and preparation. What I would recommend is putting in the effort to know your audience beforehand. Know what goals do they have from your presentation? Why are they in the room with you? What are they hoping to do? Then you can say, okay, if they want X, then I can anticipate they'll have questions about Y and Z. Or you can say, what information have they seen about this in the past? They've seen a deck, for example, that says sales have been doing pretty well. And then your deck says sales are doing pretty bad. Then they're going to be logically very frustrated and confused. So you have to anticipate their questions that are going to question the data quality that you're bringing. Is this trustworthy? You need to address that. And then you need to address, what is their level of technical proficiency? Will they understand all the technical terms that you want to say, or should you tailor them to their business language? So understanding your audience, and another key component of this could be AI. If you can't know your audience and ask them these questions beforehand, or ask your manager to tell you about it, you can ask AI, say, hey, ChatGPT, I'm going to give a presentation to an executive in my company in this domain. They have this kind of personality. They've seen this information before. How would they respond to this presentation? What are some questions you recommend I prepare? That's a really great way to prepare questions for a presentation.
Yeah, I love that. And I've got mixed feelings on AI. I think for a lot of things it's not very good, but for things like that, as sort of like a brainstorming or thinking partner, so good for that, right? Like, you don't have to bother anybody else. You don't have to find a coworker who's around to talk to, educate them on the thing. It's like you type it in and it's going to come back with some things, and there's no wrong answer there, but it's going to give you some good answers, right? So I think that's a really, really smart tip in helping to prepare. I'm curious, along those lines, AI has come up pretty much every show we've done so far. It's something that people are probably going to be asking in the questions. With AI kind of changing a lot of things in data, how do you think the role of your communication skills, does it become less important, more important? Where does communication skills go?
AI has totally disrupted our industry and many other industries. And as an example of that, when I worked in the industry, one of my roles at some point was to design code for a web page. So I would design the buttons and the things that you click. And it took me 2 weeks or a few weeks to learn that new language to design that code. It took me a few days to design one button. Now AI can do that all within seconds. And that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. It makes us pause, though, and realize that technical skills aren't the end all be all. While a few years ago, that might have been all you needed to get into the field. Now you really need communication skills, because people trust people. They are much less likely to trust AI. There have been studies that show executives much more likely to go with gut-based decisions than data-driven decisions. Another study showed that if you show people pieces of art and you say, this was made by a human, this was made by AI, they will not like the one made by AI, just knowing that. They don't trust it. Trust is one of the greatest currencies we will have as data professionals in the future, because with all this AI generated stuff, how do you know what's true? How do you know what's real? How do you know what should be moved forward with? With communication, effective, human, trustworthy communication, that's how we establish ourselves as partners with the business. And for that reason, I think it's one of the most important skills to learn in these next few years.
Yeah, man, I love that take on it. I love that you brought it to trust, because I talk about that too. How trust is like maybe the most important asset that a data professional has, for whether it's that you're doubting the actual data, or you're doubting the person's ability to interpret the data, or you're doubting maybe their motives, or you think they might be somebody who has incentive to paint a rosy picture or something like that. Any of those things just make me completely, I might as well not have the information from them if I don't trust it. So it's such an important thing to guard, and having that data professional that's can think critically about what they're actually seeing from the AI and is good at that, so you can still trust it, or how much to trust it. Like, yeah, this feels pretty trustworthy. This other part, I don't think we should, and this is why. Like, being able to interpret that and bring it back to trust, I think is so valuable. Yeah, fantastic. Christopher, I want to put up one more poll here for the audience. I'd love to just understand, like, overall, we've talked a lot about presentations. What do you guys think about presentations? Do you love it? Let's see what people have. So yeah, a lot of people saying not my favorite. I wish I was better at it. It's okay. Not a ton of people kind of indexing on the high end. So probably not surprising. They're here. They want to get better at it. So that's pretty awesome. How about, like, what do you think for folks who aren't that good? What do you see as some of the most common things that that they could work on, that you think are sort of like easy to work on? If we're thinking 80-20 principle, some relatively quick wins that they could make a major improvement. Where would you recommend somebody who wants to get better focusing?
I'd say it's a very simple mindset shift. I was working with one client who had a stutter, and they were very self-conscious about it. And I just want to preface this by saying, if you have a stutter, there may be physiological, psychological reasons for it that can't be addressed through coaching. You should see a speech pathologist for that. But for this particular person, a large component of it was mindset related, because their mindset was communication should be about me saying as much as possible, giving as much information as possible to the other person. And that's the mindset that many of us have when we communicate data. What I said is, let's consider this. What if the most important thing you value is not giving more information? What if the most important thing you value is being clear? Just this very simple mindset shift. And I said, I want you to talk to me in 1 minute, say the same thing you did in the last 5 in 1 minute, and be as clear as possible. Really take the time to be purposeful with your words. I didn't hear a single stutter. And it goes to show that the way we communicate reflects our values. If we value time, for example, we will be punctual and we will demonstrate that there are actions. If we value hard work, we will be hardworking. If we value clear communication, we will aim to communicate clearly and concisely. So for any data professionals listening, I want you to make that subtle shift from, I need to get as much out as possible, tell people as much as I know, to let me be as clear as possible. It does wonders for slides. I have this mindset shift for people who are making slides. Their slides originally start walls of text, all these things going on in the data visualizations, because they think I should get as much information out as possible. But then I say, why not be clear? Then the complicated charts go away, simple line bullets on the slide indicating clear, simple points. It does wonders for improving communication. So that's one of the major things I would recommend.
Yeah, that's a pretty fantastic focus. Be clear, not clever, and it's about getting the important message across, not just stuffing with everything you could think of. And it's amazing to hear, somebody's actually their speech pattern changing when they can actually just focus on that and not think they have to fill the space. So that's really cool. It makes me curious. Do you mind talking a little bit about what you're like when you have these corporate engagements? Mm-hmm. Is it often kind of like one-on-one with individuals? Is it more like you get a room of people and you're giving them tips? Like, how does that typically work for you?
It's a variety, but there are 2 major things that I focus on now. One is the private one-on-one coaching. So just me and one person focusing on their individual goals to become more confident in leadership communication so they can get to those positions that they want. Alternatively, I have those bigger corporate engagements where I have a room full of people and I'm teaching them about data storytelling. I have them do exercises where we have people do those presentations where they learn about the principles of good data visualization, how to construct good slides. So it's those two major offerings right now.
Awesome. Very cool. That's great. I'm seeing just a really interesting comment from Emily. I think she's bringing it back to what we were talking about, trust, a little bit before. And she was saying stakeholders can see through the BS easily. So, don't hide the negative insights. Don't try to play up the positives. And I think that's, from her, really good advice. As a data person, objectivity should be a goal there. And again, if you're seen as somebody who is a BSer, like, it's over. For me, once I think somebody is that person, it's so hard to repair that versus the person who isn't, who says, like, look, this story sucks to hear. We tried this thing, we invested a lot of money in it, and it's not working. And that story, it's not fun to tell that story. Like, we all love to tell the stories of the wins, but if you can tell that one too, I'm going to trust you more when you tell me about the wins. And I love that person. And it's really tough, the person that's like, well, let's not talk about that, because, so really, really good advice here from Emily. That's great.
I love that. And it ties back to our earlier discussion about how do you know your audience and prepare questions ahead of time. If you can anticipate there's going to be some pushback if you say everything is nice and rosy, then you should include the cons and the other side of it. You have that holistic picture. That's how people trust you, that you've acknowledged both sides.
Yeah, that's awesome. Chris, I'd love to jump into some of the questions, and folks, you guys have been doing a good job using the questions tab. Keep throwing them there. This will be the part of the show where we start pulling those up and we'll answer them live for you. Before we get in there, I want to show you guys where you can find more information about Chris. So he's got a free ebook on this very topic. You can't beat free. Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about what's in the ebook?
Absolutely. During my time posting on LinkedIn, I wanted to start my platform to create a community around good communication in our space. And I wanted to make a freely available resource so people can get started doing it right now, because it's so important to learn this skill. So this ebook covers all the different stages of presenting to an audience. How do you manage stakeholders well? How do you anticipate those questions and know your audience? How do you eventually give a really good presentation? And what I also did is include bonus videos from my YouTube channel, which also has a lot more demonstrations of how to do this. Because I believe, of course, best is free. And I think this kind of education should be accessible to anyone.
Grab that link and check it out. I think it'll probably be one of the best things that you do all week. Let's jump into the questions. So there's some awesome ones in here. Again, people keep putting them in here. So this is from Yassine, and I'll read these out because in the replay, the one little glitch about this platform is they don't actually show the questions. So Yassine says, what are some effective ways to tailor a data presentation for different audiences, like a technical person versus a non-technical person? Awesome question.
I would recommend doing the research to know what are their goals, what are their issues, what actions would they like to take in the future. And then also understand more about their world and the language that they speak. I had one client who was preparing a presentation for a big interview they had coming up. And they were coming from this very heavy biological statistical background. And originally, their presentation was filled with jargon around biology statistics. I had no idea what they were saying. And I communicated that to them. And I said, I'm just one voice. What about your audience? Would they understand these terms? And they said, well, probably not. And I said, in that case, you should not use them. Make sure that you use language your audience understands. And I also want to really pinpoint here that when you change your language to suit your audience, you are not dumbing it down. That's something I often hear in the industry, is that if we don't talk about all this cool stuff and we just talk about the basic stuff, that's dumbing it down. But no, I disagree. Because if you think about it, teachers are not dumbing it down for their students. They are making it more accessible for them to understand. It's their responsibility. If you think about color blindness and data visualization, you're not dumbing it down by making the colors easy to see for everyone. You're just making it more accessible. So I really wanted to span that notion. And help it see as communication is something collaborative. You are meeting people where they are so you can bring them up to the level that you know. You have to do that bridging. That's what communication is all about.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. And I don't think I've heard a lot of people talking about that it isn't dumbing it down. It's meeting folks where they are. And I think that's really, really good advice. And you talked about understanding like what are the actions people might want to take, what are their goals? Sometimes similarly, I think about very similar things, just maybe in other languages, like what are their incentives? Can you think like, what is this person going to get promoted if, what metric can they move, or what business outcome? That's what really matters to them. What are the actual levers that they can pull? Can you think like, are they going to need another person to actually get this done? And then what is that person's incentives and what levers they have? So I think understanding that audience is so good. So yeah, really, really good advice there. How about this one from Peter? What would be the differences in approach and challenges from presenting to a live audience like today versus presenting to an online audience? Interesting. Mm-hmm. So maybe, I guess we're actually in the latter today.
Yeah. And I'll add on to that question and interpret it as, how do you present online virtually like this versus in person with people physically in the room with you? And what I'll say to that is my favorite kind of presentation is in person, because all the elements are at play. My voice, my body language, my storytelling, and the energy I have literally is transmitting to everybody who's present. They can feel it from me. Online, it's different. We're a bit more constricted in the elements that we can bring forward in communication. There's the voice and a very small box of body language.
Yeah.
So in online communication, it's especially important to focus on your voice. As we talked about before in the recordings, you can just play your voice and work on that. You can just watch yourself without the audio to work on that. For online presentations, I recommend working really on your voice, because that's what people are paying a lot of attention to, especially if cameras are off.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. There's actually another question here that's kind of like a perfect follow-up question, talking specifically about online from Ayomide. For online presentations, how do you incorporate techniques to keep your audience engaged and encourage questions during or after the presentation? Really interesting.
What I like to do in my conference talks is not have Q&A at the very end. And the reason I do that is because what if someone asks a question that isn't relevant to the presentation? Or what if it ends on a really okay note? I'm not in control of that anymore. What I like to do is have Q&A interspersed throughout the presentation, because that makes it engaging for people. It's more of a conversation. I'm no longer talking at them and lecturing. I'm talking to them together. So what I like doing is having my presentation be broken up into sections. I want to cover point 1, point 2, point 3 in an overarching story. After point 1 is done, let's have some questions about it. If I just have Q&A at the very end, the questions are no longer relevant that they had for point 1. Yep. So that's what I recommend for presentations. Make sure you as the presenter always have the last word, and that you are in control of the flow and the energy and enthusiasm in the room at all those points.
Awesome. I love it. I might even think about how we do Q&A here, and we sort of do grab some of the questions and comments throughout, but it makes me, honestly, it makes me think about how we're handling it for the show. So that's awesome. All right. Another one here from Michael. Imagine you create reports that auto update with new data every day, like a sales report. Is it possible to implement storytelling in these kind of reports? Like 1 month sales can go up due to reason 1. And oh, that's interesting. And I guess what's your take on that question?
Mm-hmm. This is a hotly contested topic, at least that I've seen on LinkedIn, is do dashboards in general, or reports like this, can they tell stories? On one side, we have people saying, no, they can't tell stories, because on a dashboard, things are changing all the time. And a story needs to be a curated set of things that we've made for the audience at this point in time. And then the other side can say, no, you can tell stories with dashboards, because you can make, for example, the titles of the charts dynamic. So to this example, if 1 month the sales are going up, you can have that in the title. That's saying the message. The next month it goes down, you can change it. And then the other side says, well, stories aren't just about dynamic titles. You have to curate which visualizations you're telling people about. because not all of them might be relevant for this one story with one idea, with one message you want to say. My take is that you cannot tell stories with dashboards unless you have the what, the so what, and the now what. Typically, dashboards just say the what, which is this is going down, this is going up. Maybe they might have the why, which is due to reason one or reason two, but very rarely do they have the now what, which is what are we going to do about this? I see in the future a lot more potential for storytelling in dashboards with AI, where they can respond to these real-time updates and add in the now what and the so what. But right now, I don't see a lot of good storytelling in dashboards.
Yeah, you definitely need a person to be augmenting it. I don't see a way to have it automated well currently, at least. Yeah, that's totally with you there. Here's another one. This one is so tactical, I think, which is I love tactical because it really helps folks. So this is from Amide. He says, you've talked about researching your audience beforehand, but how do you do that? Is that like Google search, online stalking? Do you try to have a one-on-one chat? Like how do you approach that? And probably different in different situations.
The best way is to ask them directly. If you have important people coming to your meeting, ask them in an email or even a pre-meeting beforehand, hey, what do you want to gain from this presentation? Best heard from their mouth. If you can't do that, ask your manager, hey, I know CEO is coming to this meeting. What would they like to hear from this presentation? Best heard from someone that's typically in those rooms. If you can't do any of that, then you ask ChatGPT. You can say, hey, I have a meeting coming up with this person in this role, this person in this role, this person in this role. What would they want from this presentation? Add as much detail as you know about them. The more detail you add to your prompts, the better results ChatGPT is going to give you. So that's what I recommend. Ask them if you can, ChatGPT or other kind of online resource if that's not possible.
Yeah, I love that. We have this course called Thinking Like an Analyst, and there's one of the sections is on coming up with a measurement plan as like kind of one of the core things that we do. And some of the advice in that section is to try to anticipate the stakeholders' needs. What are their goals? What are their incentives? And I think probably the advice that surprises people the most is what you started your answer with is like, it's okay to ask them. You're like if I ask a VP of marketing or whoever the stakeholder is, hey, I think this is what you care about, but like, am I on the right track or is there anything else? And doing that ahead of time, people think that makes you look weak or like you're not smart, but I think it's the exact opposite. I think it makes you look effective and like you care about what matters. And so I love that you started your answer there, and we're totally on the same page on that one. This is a good one that I think you could probably take in a lot of ways. So this is from Amanda. Amanda says, can you talk more about how to control the flow and energy of the room? So interesting.
I would recommend thinking about moments of interaction with your audience. Many times when we're giving a presentation, we just think about what we want to say. But what's better is making it a conversation. So think about, how can I get the audience involved? So in this live session today, there have been polls. There have been moments where we've engaged in the chat with you all here. And that's how you control the flow and energy in this conversation, is you say, it's not just about me delivering information. It's about us learning together collaboratively. And if people feel they can have input, if you say, hey, how many people believe this? You raise your hand and that is addressed. You feel like you're part of this experience with me. And if questions are interspersed throughout the conversation, then you feel like you're participating in it. So what I recommend is not thinking just about the information you want to say in the presentation, but how can I get my audience involved? Polls, questions, maybe raise of hand, and incorporating those interactive elements is how you make sure the energy and attention of your audience is maintained throughout.
Yeah, that's really smart. It's two-way. It's not just one way. And if it's one way and you're thinking about it that way, you've probably already lost them, So yeah, that's fantastic. Here's another one that's again pretty tactical from Vidushi. So Vidushi says, do you think one needs to design fancy PowerPoints to share your insights from the analysis, or can you just focus on sharing the insights with simple PowerPoints? How important is the packaging in your opinion?
And I'll give the horrible answer, which is it depends. And it depends because the most important metric of whether you are successful is if your audience can use it and if they find it clear. I used to work for a manager, loved the fancy PowerPoints. I I personally don't think that's necessary, but it's because that's what they need. That's what I need to give to them. That's what they require to make their decisions, to feel the material is trustworthy. Okay, that's what I'll do. In other cases, people prefer really getting to the point and keeping it simple. You don't need a fancy slide. You just need to have the information on it and have a really good story or narrative to back it up. So unfortunately, yes, it depends. But the way you decide is, what does your audience need? And perhaps you can gauge that based on previous presentations that they've sat in.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's fantastic advice there. This one's interesting. So David asks, basically, he's been participating in Toastmasters for 15 years. Do you think it's worth putting that on a resume?
I love Toastmasters. I've worked with a lot of clients who've participated in Toastmasters. What I think would be more impactful for you to put on your resume is to use the communication skills you've developed in Toastmasters to create videos of yourself presenting the work in your portfolio. Because nobody does that. We all just create the project, put it on GitHub or a website. Very rarely do I see people recording themselves presenting. If you do that, the interviewer knows you already. They know you can communicate well. You've proved it. The interview is going to be much smoother after that point.
I love that advice. I mean, think about like resume is like at the bottom, just saying, hey, I'm good at Tableau, versus sending them your Tableau public. At least they can see that you've built it. And then even way above that is, now give me the business presentation that you would deliver to get somebody to take action and to communicate those insights. And I think, again, one, it's the most effective. It's like the best way for me to understand what it would really be like to work with you, which is what I want as a potential hiring manager, understanding, could you fit on the team? And nobody does it. And the magic of editing, this is live. That will not be live. You could shoot that thing 100 times and you'll probably shoot it a bunch of times, and your first one will not be your best. So in the process, you'll get better at delivering the presentation because you'll see the weird things that you do, and you'll come out with a great one that you can use as marketing collateral. So I'd say if there's one takeaway that has come out of this show, I'd say that's probably my favorite one right now. It's like, record yourself delivering presentations and use that as marketing collateral. That's such good advice. Amazing. We've probably got time for a couple more, and then we'll get you out of here. This one's from Mivu. I'm an executive assistant trying to transition into data analysis. What online resources would you recommend to help me become a pro in data presentation? Other than the free ebook, of course,
right.
Which I'll put a link up to that again in a second.
Cool. I would also recommend the YouTube channel that links from that ebook. On that, I think I have 100+ videos now where I have very short bite-sized tips. You can watch one every day for 100 days or something like that. And they cover, how do you become a good data presenter? From tips about how do you use your voice, how do you use your body language, how do you create a good story. I have full recorded workshops I've given on executive presentation, dashboard presentation, stakeholder communication. So I would highly recommend that resource in my ebook for making that journey.
Awesome. And let me put that ebook up again one more time, just so folks get a chance. Again, this is a totally free ebook. I think it's 140 pages, something like that. So a lot of good content in there. If you liked this and you want more from Chris, this is where to get it without spending a dime. So check that out. Chris, amazing show today. You've been so good. In the hot seat, folks, I'd love to hear in the chat, how do you think Chris did? My opinion is like, wow, your answers to the Q&A questions and the main discussion have been fantastic. I think there's been so much value that you've given to everybody. So I really appreciate it, and thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to be on the show.
Thank you to Chris. Thank you to everybody who has showed up. It's been so fun doing this with you all, and hope you guys got a lot of value in it.
Thank you so much, everyone. Love the conversation we had here.